Do you know that the sunflower is not just a beautiful flower, but one of the most remarkable plants on the planet? Its ability to follow the sun throughout the day has been puzzling scientists for over 200 years. And the most interesting part? This ability is not just a beautiful natural phenomenon. It is a complex survival mechanism that allowed the sunflower to win hearts around the world and remain one of the most useful plants. But why does this happen? How can a plant without eyes, brain, or nervous system track the position of the sun with a precision that amazes even the most experienced astronomers? Why do young plants rotate following the sun, while adult flowers freeze, facing east? And most importantly, how can this ability help you grow a stronger and more beautiful sunflower in your own garden? Let us unravel all the mysteries of this remarkable plant. You will learn how the biological compass built into the sunflower works, why the plant even needs it, and how this knowledge can be used when growing your own sunflower. Imagine a field where hundreds, thousands of sunflowers are growing. If you visit it at different times of the day, you will notice something striking. Early in the morning, when the sun has just risen over the horizon in the east, almost all the flowers are turned toward it. By noon, when the sun is high in the sky, they follow it. And in the evening, before sunset in the west, almost all the sunflowers are facing westward. This phenomenon is called heliotropism, or sun following. The word comes to us from ancient Greek. Helios means sun, and tropism means turning or movement. But this is not just some random process. It is a whole system that works in the body of the plant. Young sunflowers, which have not yet formed their main flower, demonstrate this phenomenon especially brightly. Their shoots, on which leaves sit, literally rotate following the sun throughout the day, from sunrise to sunset. This movement can be noticeable even to the naked eye if you carefully observe the plant for several hours. When the flower fully develops and blooms, the picture changes. Adult sunflowers typically freeze in their final position and stop tracking the sun. Most of them end up facing east, the direction from which the sun rises. This is not a mistake, not a coincidence. This is the result of natural selection, developed over millions of years of evolution. But here is the most surprising thing. Not all sunflowers behave the same way. There are varieties that remain more mobile even in adulthood. There are those that stop at one position earlier than others. This diversity of behavior is the first hint that heliotropism is not simple mechanics, but a complex adaptive system. To understand why a sunflower turns toward the sun, you need to look inside the plant and see what happens at the cellular level. It turns out that an entire system of management and regulation unfolds there. The main actor in this performance is a special substance called auxin. This is a plant hormone like adrenaline or happiness hormones in humans. Auxin is responsible for cell growth, and it is produced in the upper part of the sunflower's shoot, where young leaves and the tip of the plant are located. Here's how it works. When the sun shines on a sunflower, the light is absorbed by special proteins in cells, photoreceptors. These photoreceptors are sensitive to blue light, which is part of the solar spectrum. When they catch blue light, they send a signal inside the plant. This signal leads to the movement of auxin. Here is the main trick. Auxin begins to accumulate on the shady side of the shoot, the side facing away from the sun. Because of this, cells on the shaded side grow faster than on the sunny side. And when one side of a shoot grows faster than the other, the whole shoot bends. The shoot bends toward the light, that is, toward the sun. This movement can be observed with the naked eye on young sunflowers over several hours. But that's not all. In the plant, there is yet another mechanism that works at an even deeper level. This is the circadian rhythm of the plant. A sunflower, like all living organisms, has built-in biological clocks. These clocks work in approximately a 24-hour cycle, even if you place the plant in complete darkness. The circadian rhythm of the sunflower works in sync with the sun's cycle. The plant knows when the sun approximately rises in the east and when it sets in the west. Because of this, even if the day is cloudy and the sun is not visible, the sunflower can still move in the right direction, following its internal schedule. When the sunflower is young, both these mechanisms work together. On one hand, The plant tracks the actual position of the sun in the sky thanks to photoreceptors. On the other hand, its circadian rhythm helps it predict the movement of the sun, even when it is not visible or when it is cloudy. As the sunflower matures, an important reorganization occurs. When the flower is almost fully formed and begins to open, the plant begins to listen more to its circadian rhythm than to the actual position of the sun. Young shoots continue to rotate, but the main flower already sets its position and freezes. This freezing usually happens in the facing east position. And this is not by chance, there is a very practical reason for this. Now that we know how heliotropism works, let's figure out why the sunflower needs it. After all, many plants such as wheat, corn, or even roses do not track the sun. Why did the sunflower choose this particular strategy? The first and most obvious reason is energy accumulation. Sunlight is a source of energy for the plant. Through the process of photosynthesis, the plant converts sunlight into chemical energy, which it needs for growth and development. The more sunlight a plant receives, the more energy it can accumulate. A young sunflower, just beginning to grow, finds itself in a competitive situation. Other plants grow around it, shading it, competing for space and nutrients. By tracking the sun throughout the day and night, a young sunflower ensures that it receives the maximum possible amount of direct sunlight. This allows it to grow faster than its neighbors. Research shows that young sunflowers that actively track the sun grow 20 to 30% faster than plants that are not allowed to move. This is a huge advantage in a world where only the fastest and strongest survive. But there is a second reason related to pollination and insects. When a sunflower is young and its main flower has not yet bloomed, this is not so noticeable. But once the flower begins to develop and open, the picture changes. Heat. Here is the second part of the puzzle. When a sunflower faces east and stands still in this position, its yellow petals work as a reflector. They catch the first rays of sun at sunrise and reflect them to the center of the flower. This creates a greenhouse effect. The center of the flower maintains a higher temperature than the surrounding environment. This is important because heat attracts pollinating insects. Bees, butterflies, and other insects search for flowers that are warmer than the surrounding environment. Heat means nectar, pollen, and food. A sunflower facing east becomes like a beacon. It attracts far more pollinating insects than if it were facing another direction or if its petals did not reflect solar heat. Moreover, researchers have discovered that the elevated temperature in the center of the sunflower improves pollen ripening and increases the viability of pollen grains. This means that pollination becomes more effective, and thus the plant can produce more seeds. A third reason is related to wind direction and pollen dispersal. Flowers facing east are better protected from prevailing westerly winds. This helps retain pollen at the flower a bit longer, increasing chances of pollination. A fourth reason is energy conservation. This may sound paradoxical, but continuous sun tracking requires energy. Young plants spend this energy because they are growing and need maximum light. But once the flower blooms, energy costs become less justified. An adult plant can afford to stop tracking the sun and simply stand in the optimal position, saving energy for seed production. All these reasons work together, creating a perfect adaptive system. A young sunflower behaves like a businessman rushing to a meeting. It is constantly on the move, catching every moment to get more light. An adult sunflower behaves like a sage who has taken an ideal position and calmly waits for life to come to him. Heliotropism of the sunflower was known to people even in ancient times. The ancient Greeks and Romans wrote about this phenomenon in their texts. But scientific study of this process began much later. One of the first scientists to seriously study plant movements was English naturalist and traveler Charles Darwin. Yes, that very Darwin, famous for the theory of evolution. At the end of his life, when he was already over 70 years old, Darwin decided to take a break from big philosophical questions and engage in small but amazing phenomena in the life of plants. Together with his son Francis Darwin, he conducted a series of experiments with various plants, including sunflowers. They covered plants with opaque caps, allowed light to pass only from one side, observed movements, and recorded their observations. In 1880, they published a book titled The Power of Movement in Plants. In this book, the Darwins described the mechanism of phototropism, the ability of a plant to bend toward light. They concluded that in the upper part of a plant's shoot, there is some substance that reacts to light and causes bending. They did not know what this substance was, but their assumptions were very close to the truth. Later, in the 1930s, other scientists isolated this substance and named it auxin. It turned out that Darwin was almost right in his assumptions about the mechanism of operation. The Darwins described the phenomenon but did not fully explain it. Scientists of the next generation did that. In the 1970s and 1980s, scientists began to unravel the secrets of the circadian rhythm of plants. They discovered that plants have built-in biological clocks that help them synchronize with the day-night cycle. Research at the molecular level showed which genes are responsible for these clocks and how they work. Quite recently, in the 2000 and 2010, thanks to the development of computer technology and microscopy, scientists were able to track the movement of auxin in plants at the cellular level. They saw how auxin moves from one side of a shoot to the other, how this causes changes in the rate of cell growth, and how all this leads to the visible bending of the plant. Today, we know much more about these processes than ever before. But interestingly, even today scientists find details in sunflower heliotropism that they did not anticipate. For example, recent research has shown that between young and adult plants there is not simply a switching of mechanisms, but an entire cascading system of regulation involving dozens of different hormones and proteins. This is one of the most intriguing parts of the story of sunflower heliotropism. When you see a young plant that literally rotates following the sun, and then look at an adult flower that stands motionless, it may seem like these are completely different plants. But what exactly happens at the moment when the sunflower stops tracking the sun? The answer lies in the concentration of auxin. Remember, we said that auxin accumulates on the shady side of the shoot, causing it to grow and bend the plant? When a sunflower is young, its shoots are very sensitive to auxin. Even a small change in the concentration of auxin on different sides of the shoot is enough to cause visible movement. As the plant grows, its shoots become stiffer and thicker. The structural tissues of the plant are strengthened by the accumulation of cellulose and other strong polymers. When shoots become thicker and stiffer, they become less responsive to the same concentrations of auxin that caused sharp movements in a young plant. At the same time, the sensitivity of cells to light also changes. In young plants, the cells of the shoot tip are very sensitive to blue light and quickly respond to its presence. But with age, this sensitivity decreases. Cells become, as it were, less jumpy. They do not react so sharply to every change in the direction of light. Moreover, when a plant begins to produce a flower, it releases a large amount of other hormones into the developing flower that suppress the phototropic response. It is as if the plant said, "Enough running back and forth. Now we need to focus on producing a flower and seeds." The main stem of the plant becomes thick and woody, and this process is completed approximately by the time the flower fully opens. At this stage, the plant practically loses the ability to bend quickly. But here is what is interesting. If you look at the lateral shoots of an adult sunflower, you may notice that they retain some ability to heliotropism. This is because the lateral shoots are younger and more delicate than the main stem. They continue to grow and develop while the main plant has already completed its cycle. Some research has shown that if you take a broken or bent adult sunflower, that is, if the stem is broken and the plant falls, the regulatory system can turn on again. A wounded plant may begin attempts to return to a vertical position or to a position facing east. This indicates that the ability to heliotropism does not disappear completely, but rather is suppressed and regulated as the plant develops. The transition from actively following the sun to a stationary position is not a sudden switch, but a gradual process. If you observe a sunflower over many weeks, you can see how its movements become slower and less sharp, until they finally stop altogether. Not all sunflowers behave the same way. Despite the fact that heliotropism is a fundamental property of the genus Helianthus, to which the sunflower belongs, there are variations in the intensity and nature of this phenomenon. Large annual sunflowers. Those very sunflowers that are grown for seeds and oil usually demonstrate the most pronounced heliotropism in young age. Their shoots are flexible enough, and the heliotropism mechanism itself is very well developed. This makes sense because for such large plants it is critical to get as much light as possible in young age to build a large, powerful stem and a large flower. Decorative sunflower varieties are usually somewhat smaller in size. Some of them, such as the Solarium or Red Barn variety, were originally bred to be less mobile even in young age. This is because such plants are often grown for cutting, for bouquets and arrangements. Flowers that do not rotate and do not move are more convenient to handle and more predictable in shape. Miniature sunflowers often barely demonstrate heliotropism. Their shoots are thin and rigid, and their flowers appear very early in the life of the plant, when active sun tracking may already be suppressed by other hormonal signals. Some miniature varieties are bred so that the flower is immediately facing the right direction, without a preliminary phase of heliotropism. Multi-flowered sunflowers. These are varieties that produce not one, but several flowers on one plant. Each of these flowers can demonstrate varying degrees of heliotropism. The main flower usually remains stationary, facing east, but the lateral flowers may continue to change their position for a longer time. There are also wild relatives of the cultivated sunflower that grow in Mexico and America. Some of them demonstrate extreme heliotropism, tracking the sun with almost mathematical precision for a very long time. This is because they live in conditions of strong competition and their survival depends on maximum sun exposure. Here is an interesting question. What happens to a sunflower on a cloudy day when the sun is not visible? Does it move? And if it does, in what direction? The answer is yes, it still moves because the plant's biological clocks come into play. Remember the circadian rhythm? These are built-in biological clocks that work independently of external conditions. When the sun is cloudy and photoreceptors do not receive strong signals from blue light, the sunflower relies on these clocks. The plant somehow knows that at a certain hour the sun usually rises. It expects the sunrise, so its shoot begins to bend eastward approximately at the time when the sun would have risen, even if there is no sun. Similarly, the plant knows when the sun usually sets. It will turn westward, even if the sky is completely cloudy. Research has shown that these biological clocks are quite accurate. Even with prolonged absence of the sun, a sunflower can make a mistake in its calculations only by a few hours over several days. These are incredibly accurate clocks for a plant. However, there is a nuance. If you place a young sunflower in complete darkness and it does not see the sun for several days in a row, its circadian rhythm will begin to drift. Day after day, its estimate of the time of day will become less accurate because its clocks do not synchronize with the actual day-night cycle. But as soon as the sun reappears and the plant receives a signal from blue light, everything quickly returns to normal. The photoreceptors will transmit information about the position of the sun to the plant's brain, if the plant had a brain in our sense, and the circadian rhythm will quickly synchronize. This is very similar to what happens to people when changing time zones. You can rely on your internal clock, but when you come to a new city and see that the sun is positioned completely differently from where you expected, your internal clock quickly adjusts. Interestingly, researchers have found that young plants are more sensitive to the actual position of the sun, while adult plants rely more on their circadian rhythm. This makes sense. A young plant needs maximum precision to catch light, while an adult plant just needs to stand in one position based on its internal schedule.